From the White House.
Our journey is not complete until our gay brothers and sisters are treated like anyone else under the law.
To the State House.
I believe that every Minnesotan should have the freedom to marry legally the person she or he loves, whether of the same or other sex.
Democrats are pushing for marriage equality, a stance that drew a partial standing ovation from Minnesota lawmakers during Governor Dayton's State of the State address, but only partial. And that's the problem for supporters of same-sex marriage in Minnesota.
And I think there's actually a better than even chance of getting that bill passed this year.
Minnesotans United, which rallied activists to defeat the amendment, now has its sights set on pressuring lawmakers to legalize gay marriage this session.
We're very quickly coming to full speed on the second phase of Minnesotans United, or as I call it sometimes, MN United 2.0.
The campaign's coming out was a huge Valentine's Day rally at the Capitol on February 14th.
Over 1,000 people, over 100 faith leaders call attention to the fact that this is an issue of fundamental freedom and one of religious freedom. The government shouldn't be in the business of telling any church who can and cannot get married. The conversation is very similar to what we did in the campaign, in the ballot campaign. We really want to connect authentically with folks about why marriage matters.
We've been having this debate and this discussion about who is family in Minnesota, what love and marriage means, what marriage is all about, who should have access to basic freedoms and opportunities in our state for over 10 years.
But some DFL lawmakers, like Representative Erin Murphy, who supports gay marriage rights, urges caution before the DFL pushes for marriage equality.
It started a conversation that I think needs to continue in Minnesota about the question of the freedom to marry and if that applies to same-sex couples. And that needs to push out ahead of us in the legislature. And I want to make sure that if we act on this question this session, that we're acting on it in a way that is sustainable and durable going forward with the support of the people.
Minnesotans voted down the amendment that would have closed discussion and constitutionally banned gay marriage. But can marriage equality proponents automatically assume that translates into support for legalizing same-sex marriage?
I think the conversation really was about let's not foreclose the conversation and let's not put this in the Constitution. And that conversation is somewhat different than I'm ready now to support this for everybody in Minnesota.
Sure, let's continue this conversation. But it wasn't just about keeping the Constitution clean. It was really about families, love, and marriage. And so I think we kind of had that debate, and we're continuing that conversation. The DFL needs to stand up and take some steps on those things it says it believes in.
The DFL controls the State House, the Senate, and the Governor's Mansion. But does it have the votes it needs to pass marriage equality?
Nobody's declaring victory. We don't have the votes we need yet. We need to go out and earn the support for the freedom to marry. And so we are doing that by being in conversation with our legislators. We do have commitments from folks who represent districts where the amendment did pass, where it got more than 50%, yet they understand that this is an important issue of freedom. And
might some Republicans peel off and vote for marriage equality?
We're working very hard to understand which Republicans we should reach out to and work with. The Republican Party has always been about individual liberty and individual freedom. And if they want to uphold that core principle of their party, then they should want to work with us.
Republican colleagues, friends of mine, choose to vote in the manner in which they did. It's very, very hard for me to reconcile. More than a handful came to me afterwards seeking forgiveness, absolution, expressing their sorrow for having taken this vote.
That all of us are created equal is the star that guides us still. Just as it guided our forebears through Seneca Falls and Selma and Stonewall, just as
national trends seem to be tipping towards same-sex marriage rights. President Obama even became a cheerleader for the movement during his second inaugural address.
This is where the electorate is going. There's the old Wayne Gretzky quote that says, skate to where the puck is going to be, not to where it is. And in 2014, the majority of Minnesotans will be supporting the freedom to marry for same-sex couples. The support for marriage in Minnesota increased by about 12% over the course of the last year.
So why are some in the DFL party hesitant and afraid that pushing social legislation could hurt them in 2014, just as it doomed Republicans last November?
When the Republicans put this amendment on the ballot, that's the only thing they did. That was their crowning achievement, their key accomplishment. They did that on the way towards shutting down state government, because of their overreach on fiscal and spending and tax issues. So it was an extreme measure that was designed simply to exclude people and divide people and play up the politics of fear and division. And they did it in the absence of doing things that they otherwise should have been tending to, like making sure that we were balancing the state's budget and working with the governor to pass finance bills and making sure that our tax system was fair. I think the perceived political risk is overblown and overstated.
You know, some people are trying to analyze and analyze and analyze. What are the politics? If we do this, what happens? If we don't do this, what happens? Why don't we try and figure out what's right to do? Give people equality. Why don't we do what's right and then figure out how to deal with the political consequences? In this case, I happen to think the political consequences would be a disaster if we don't do what's right.
Richard Carlbom points out that not just activists, but the business community also wants marriage equality in Minnesota.
Business leaders in town, they're very concerned about competitiveness. They're very concerned about the ability to recruit the top talent. And if all of a sudden you have, you know, Washington State where there's Seattle, and you all of a sudden have, you know, if the Supreme Court rules in Prop 8, all of a sudden you have California, New York, all these states who have the freedom to marry, it becomes a lot harder to recruit people to Minnesota. And it's, you know, 20 degrees out and it's snowing. It's hard to recruit really talented people, and so this is going to be an element of competitiveness.
Regardless of when lawmakers vote on marriage equality, DFLers agree that the public needs to continue applying pressure on their representatives and making their voices heard at the Capitol.
But instead of only thinking about a campaign that pushes legislators toward a goal of a vote, I think first it's important to engage Minnesotans once again in the notion of the freedom to marry, and to bring that information and that conversation from outside the Capitol, inside the Capitol.
And introduce the bill, I can run it through the committee process, but we're not going to be successful until you engage a constituency to mobilize around this idea. And that means people are sending emails to their legislators, calling them up on the phone, writing them letters, coming to the Capitol and visiting them in person to talk about why this idea will affect their lives personally.
There's a difference between being strategic and being patient. And what I would say is Minnesotans United is looking to be strategic. Yeah. We're not patient. We want this done.